Welcome back, and we are discussing the offseason outlook for the Boston Bruins. And, I get asked every now and then, how does Boston defy gravity when it comes to the standings? I genuinely don't know. Good coaching, smart when it comes to contracts. Even the worst contract on the team is forgivable, and just really smart management all around. And the question being one of, well, how long can they stay at or near the top of the league? Well, I mean, they eventually are going to fall. I don't know when. I don't know if this offseason is going to be the one that finally does them in. They're definitely going to have trouble staying under the cap and keeping everybody, which is why all season we've had all kinds of speculation about Torrey Krug, where he might go, how much is he going to cost. If anything, what we've got going on right now with the stoppage might make it easier for Boston to come up with a contract offer that both keeps the team cap compliant and keeps the player with the team, but it is going to be a challenge. In all likelihood, there will be teams who can offer him more money. So, to go back to what Marchand said about it, for players who want to win, they sign for less and stay in Boston, and for players who want their money, they go get that somewhere else. So, when we look at their overall lineup and their numbers, and they were 44, 14, and 12 at the pause, 100 points. They were playing some of their best hockey at the pause as well. 49, 24, and 9 last year for 107 points. They were going to fly past that 107 points, get up close to that 112 they had in 2017, 2018, where they were 50, 20, and 12 overall. Very good record, of course. Second round, they lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning that year. But for Boston, this is a big offseason. This is an offseason where Don Sweeney is likely going to make that move either towards Boston winning a Stanley Cup or doing some form of a retool on the fly. Because I can't see with Bergeron at 34, Krejci at 33, Marchand's at 31. I can't see with those key players in their 30s this team going into some kind of an actual like New York Rangers style retool. But it all depends on how things go next season. Now, for this year, things look pretty good, and then the season gets paused. So, who knows if they might have won it or might not have. And for people who believe in the curse of the President's Trophy, the answer is no, they wouldn't have won it because they were number one overall in the NHL. Now, their UFA list, Nordstrom, I'd like to see them keep Nordstrom around. I'd like to see him stay on the fourth line for, decent price. Not a ton of money, but I thought Nordstrom played well. Krug, I really want Krug to stay. I really, really do. And to me, Torrey Krug's been one of my all-time favorite Bruins defensemen, right up there with guys like Bork and Wesley and whatnot. So we'll see if he stays. If he goes, I don't know how you replace that offense from the blue line. I love McAvoy. McAvoy doesn't have the offensive skill that he's shown to this date anyways that Torrey Krug has. Zdeno Chara, all indications are he comes back next year again, even though he's in his 40s. He'll sign for a cheap deal if he does. Halak, it'll be interesting to see what Boston does in the offseason when it comes to goaltending. But we'll come back to that because, again, Halak has been able to pretty much split the starts with Rask, which has helped Rask when it comes to the playoffs. You look at the run last year in the playoffs, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Halak was able to rest during the season. And Halak's been very, very much praising the work of, Rask has been very much praising the work of Halak in giving him time off. Kevin Miller, his contract's up this summer. Miller's been injured, I think, the entire season. I don't think he played a game this year. And so that contract's gone. I was never a huge fan of the Kevin Miller contract at the time it was signed, so that's done, and I can't see him coming back. I mean, is he going to continue his career? What's going to happen? Is this the end for him? Now, on the restricted free agent side, Bjork. He's got arbitration rights. Bjork's an interesting one. I think there were times where Boston fans were overhyping him. I also think there are times where he's been under the radar, and I think the reality is somewhere in the middle. If they can keep him, I think he can score 10 to 15 goals a year. Again, best suited for probably third line minutes. DeBrusk is a restricted free agent this summer. He's going to get some money, but how much? So is he a player that you pay big money to with the idea that he's going to continue to develop into a top power forward in the NHL? Does he qualify as a power forward in the NHL? Does he hit enough for that? And where does he fit in? So it'll be interesting to see how much DeBrusk gets. Matt Grzelcyk, well, they can't afford to lose Grzelcyk, so if that goes to arbitration, Just give him his money. I love Grzelcyk, and the idea of, worst case scenario would be you lose Krug. Chara says, well, I'm going to retire. And then Grzelcyk says, well, I'm going to hold out because, I'm not happy about things. And anyways, so I want to see Grzelcyk stay with Boston. I mean, decent cap hit, but Grzelcyk's an underrated defenseman. People find that out if they watch enough Boston games. Brett Ritchie, arbitration rights. He's been in the minors, so and you've got Nick Ritchie there too now, so I don't know. Having both Ritchies together is nice and all, but I don't know what Boston's going to do in the offseason. They're at $61.3 million for next year. So, again, Krug can stay. He's just not going to get the best offer money-wise from Boston that he can get anywhere. But, there are plenty of players playing for less, including Pastrnak. Pastrnak is getting paid $6.67 million a year. At least that's the cap hit till 2023. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. You can make the argument, and we can debate that argument about whether or not Pasternak's the best goal scorer in the league. I would say he's in the conversation. I think sometimes with Pastrnak, I might have a bit of a blind spot because as a Bruins fan, and with the channel and everything, I don't want to praise his goal scoring too much. So I probably don't want to go overboard with it, but he has a fantastic nose for the net. It is somewhat reminiscent of Ovechkin. It does have an Ovechkin feel to it, in that he does have a spot in front of the net where he likes to score from. And even though you know where that spot is, he's going to take the shot, it's really, really hard to stop it. And goaltenders around the NHL found that out this year. He got off to that insane start to the season. I knew he'd cool off eventually, and he did. But even with that cooling off, still one of the best goal scorers in the NHL. And then with worst contract, I went with John Moore, who's at $2.75 million, which is not bad. Krejci's I thought about, but honestly, with the way Krejci's played the last year or so, it really isn't that bad. And his contract's up at the end of, I think it's next season. So it's not a bad contract. And honestly, now Coyles I get nervous about. Charlie Coyles' extension does make me a little bit nervous because it is a lot of time and it's a lot of money. And I do wonder, but at the same time, Moore, a guy who's a sixth defenseman, sometimes a healthy scratch, $2.75 million is probably a bit pricey, considering there are other options in Boston's own lineup, which are a lot cheaper. So maybe that contract's part of what you have to sacrifice in order to keep Krug. I don't know. But there are ways to keep Krug around if he wants to stay in Boston. We'll see what they do, but that has been the conversation with Bruins fans for good reason. He drives so much of the offense, especially on the power play. 5-on-5, he can have his scary moments. He definitely needs a Mark Mathot type there with him to keep an eye on the defensive side of things, but offensively, he's fantastic. Now, rookie watch, Urho Vakanainen. So, Jacobs Borrell was expected to be in the NHL, but he gets passed by Jeremy Lauzon and Vakanainen. And I hope Vakanainen gets a shot at coming right out of training camp and playing for the Bruins. I liked him in his call-ups that he's put in, and I think he's a good defenseman. I think the all-around game is there. He's not going to replace a Krug, but he's a good all-around defenseman. Cameron Hughes got called up for a game. And again, the Boston Bruins, they don't just have that top six. They're really good at putting together a really solid bottom six and figuring out exactly who's going to work. And it's interesting because a lot of their bottom six players that have really liked in Boston have gone elsewhere and struggled, which tells me that there's a really good coaching system in place and that Don Sweeney knows, okay, this guy will work with this. It works really well. And then they go on to other teams and they struggle to have that same level of success. So if Hughes ends up in the mix for the bottom six next year, I'm fine with that because I've learned to trust what Don Sweeney's plan is. Jack Studnicka probably comes up next year. That's likely going to be the plan. The one thing I do wonder is, I've got a lot of UFA, RFA names up there, but how many spots on the roster are there really going to be next year? So for a guy like Studnicka to come up, I could have put up Trent Frederick, but he's not a rookie. Trent Frederick's played too many games now between two seasons to qualify as a rookie. But, Studnicka will get a shot at playing on the roster. He looked good in his call-up, and we'll see. Another name that's not on the board, because I don't think he ends up making it, Zach Senyshyn. The interesting thing about Senyshyn is, in the 4 games he played for Boston, his numbers were good. his numbers in the AHL weren't great. And it's still, this is the guy they drafted ahead of Matthew Barzal, will always be how that's remembered. Yeah, so, Studnicka for me, we'll probably see up. And then this is where it gets interesting. So I mentioned Halak. So if you're going to let Halak go, do you bring back Hudobin's UFA this summer? Do you bring back Hudobin? Now, Halak is playing on a very cap-friendly $2.7 million cap hit this year. So, does he look for a raise going somewhere else, or does he look and go, you know what, I'm 34 years of age, and I like it in Boston. Boston and I get along. I can sign with Boston for another $2.7 million for 2 more years. Is that where we're going to see that end up? Or does Boston let Halak go, maybe get rid of Moore's contract somehow, and find a way to keep Krug? And then do they roll the dice on one of the kids? So Jeremy Swayman's coming in. He's in his early 20s, so there's some risk there. Swayman probably goes to the AHL, but Dan Vladar. So Vladar, who for me has been baffling, and I say baffling because every time they do proposed Seattle expansion, almost every mock draft I've seen has had Vladar being protected by Boston and Rask being exposed, and I'm thinking, but why? And then Rask ends up going to Seattle, but why would Seattle want Vladar? And that's where my problem is with all of those mock drafts I've seen, where I'm like, wait, why is Boston protecting Dan Vladar, who hasn't played a game in the NHL? And my issue with Vladar has been all the way through that his numbers didn't look all that great either. Like, he wasn't really seen as a top prospect. Now, this year his numbers have been very good. If Don Sweeney's been paying attention to what's going on in Providence and believes in him, we could very well see him as the backup next year, and maybe then Swayman gets a shot at being the starter for Providence right out of the gate. That's where I'm really interested to see what happens. Does Halak come back, and do they make some kind of a change in net going younger? Because, again, Rask is 33, and goaltenders can be very good into their mid-late 30s, but you want to have that next guy. You want to make sure you have that next goaltender in line, so that for fans who want to see this team stay at the top and keep putting up 100-point seasons every year, goaltending's really, really important. It's a huge part of that, and you've got to make sure that if Swayman's going to be the next guy, you treat him right. If Vladar has a genuine shot at being that guy, you may give him that shot next year. It'd be very interesting to see what they do. And again, how do they keep everybody together? And if people had to ask me how many more years do you think it's going to be before Boston's, starting that drop in the standings, it could start next year. It absolutely could, because when players are in their 30s and teams start getting older, it's kind of easy for a team to start looking older all of a sudden, and it can be just like that. All of a sudden they look older. But for Boston right now, that's not a concern, and things look pretty good. And Pasternak's not one of those older players. So at the very least, they've got their sniper that's ready to stick around for a long time to come. And there are a couple of decent prospects, although they do not have that superstar center coming up. That is one part that I do wonder how they're going to handle it when Bergeron is no longer around, and when Krejci. So Krejci and Bergeron, there isn't really an heir apparent in my eyes to those two as the number one center. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Once again, thank you guys for your support. The growth on the channel lately has been kind of insane, because there hasn't been hockey for, it's now over 6 weeks. So the fact this channel's still growing is a testament to those of you who've been sharing, discussing, commenting, liking videos, even disliking videos. The views, everything counts. And thank you guys so much for all of that. Remember, stay home where you can. Stay as safe as possible right now. Everything's going to be just fine. I will talk to you again very soon.